HVAC 360 is brought to you today by Construction, a new fragrance by Ralph DeGrosse. Need to smell like you belong in the field? This new cologne will make it seem like you never left. We've combined the scents of drywall, adhesives with just a hint of angle grinder smoke. No one will ever know that you were never on the job site, or that you're just a greenhorn trying not to stand out. Who's into construction? That's right, you are. And don't forget our classic, arriving just in time for the holidays, Porta John Cherry. Hey, what's up? Welcome back, everybody. This is episode number 97. Matt Nelson here, your host for HVAC 360, helping you go further and faster in the field of HVAC. This is the space where I share stories, have interviews with industry experts, and help you get your HVAC knowledge up to another level. Those of you don't know, who are new here or you haven't signed up already, get to HVAC360.com and sign up for that newsletter. Become part of that growing community, and there I issue different games that we play every Friday. So bunch of fun stuff that I share on the weekly newsletter. Get there, sign up, be part of the community. So, what's up for this week? Well, I wanted to kind of take it back to a 101 level and share some things that I know about construction submittals. Obviously, this is not a definitive list per se, but it is a bunch of tips and tricks that I've picked up along the years, and some general things that I didn't know starting out that I know now. So I thought I'd kind of share that back with you. So they are your last check before the contractors get down to the business of installing your design. And we'll get to those tips right after a brief word from our sponsor. So let's talk about submittals. What are they? Really, they're documents from the contractor for you to confirm that they of what they should buy and install. Essentially, kind of goes like this: you do your design, and you're like, "All right, Mr. Contractor, here's my drawings and specifications. Here's my contract document, so to speak." And the contractor takes a look at him, goes, "Okay, well, he wants one of these, two of those," and so he gets a shopping list together, and he sends it back to you and saying, "Hey, here's my shopping list. Did I get this right?" And you can either say yes or no, and kind of be on your way. So again, it's a last check before they get down to business. I guess, so what kind of documents is he sharing with you? Typically, they're kind of one of three varieties. They're either a shop drawing. This is more of a fabrication thing. A lot of times you'll see these architecturally when you're looking at like curtain wall systems or some sort of steel fabrication that needs to get approved. There are material samples, and those are, whether it be tile, whether it be different sort of products. A lot of times architecturally, they'll want a sample of the product before they order a bunch of it, because they want to make sure that it's the right color, it's the right kind of texture that they're looking for, it's the right kind of quality. So a lot of times you can do things like that when you're ordering for the materials. And last but not least is the equipment cut sheets. And typically that last one is really what you're going to be dealing with probably 99% of the time. So let's dive into it a little bit more. What should we really know? There is, and I guess here's something that I really didn't know getting into the field, is that they will take your, they being the construction management team, whether that be an independent CM or whether that just be the general contractor or whoever's running the project. And they'll typically come up with a list of all the specifications that they expect to see, so they can go through and make sure that they got them all. And where does that list come from? That comes from the specifications that you or someone on your team wrote. So you should kind of go back and understand what you're requesting a submittal on and what you're not, and what the difference is. So that's something that you can have a discussion internally. But that's where they get this list. And why is that list important? Why should you care about that? At least it helps you plan out exactly how many submittals that you're going to see over the course of a project. And it understands like, okay, well, am I done with it? Or am I not done with it? Or what's missing? So it helps you keep track. If you don't have a copy of this list, you can check with your project manager. They were on the architectural side, or whoever's running the project for you, and they typically can get this list. If there's no list, that might be a cause for concern. So you need, that might be, a little red flag that goes up in the background that you say, okay, well, I got to, pay special attention to this project. Other things to remember. Once you get this list, just remember that typically by the time you're reviewing submittals, the bids are in. A contractor has already bid the project. They've said, okay, Mr. Owner, Mr. Construction Manager, I'm in for this amount of money. And the owner, construction manager, whoever's running the project, they say, yep, okay, we get it. That's good. That number is good. So remember, if there's something special in your project that may be atypical for a contractor to run in, or maybe it wasn't specified clearly, or maybe it wasn't in the drawings clearly, maybe that's something that needs to be, there's a time for like a bid review scope meeting, typically with contractors. Maybe that's something that you want to either tell your project manager, or you want to actually be there yourself to be able to communicate to the contractor, hey, make sure that you can ask the question, hey, do you have all of whatever special system, whatever special scope is in the project? If you get that question asked and the contractor says yes, then they're on the hook for it. If they say no, then they get a chance to change their bid, which is a good thing. And then there's the third kind of uncomfortable situation where they say yes, they don't know what they're saying yes to, and then there becomes a fight sometime later on in the project over this unknown scope that you've actually added onto that. And what could that be? Maybe it's a special system that they're not familiar with. Maybe it's a special procedure that you've asked a little bit. Sometimes you're a little bit more stringent for a specific reason because of a conversation that you've had with an owner. So you may be doing more duct pressure testing. Maybe you're doing more, inspections than typical. So you want to make sure that is in the scope, and a scope review meeting is something that you should make sure that's clear during. So another thing to remember is that these submittals that are coming from the contractors, they actually come from the manufacturer's reps typically. And if you are using, and I guess when you go through a design, a lot of times you're going to be using some sort of basis of design, because you're not going to design a system. You're not going to design a system based around 3 different manufacturers. You're going to pick one that you want to design around, and that's going to be your basis of design. And then you're going to add in a couple of people that do similar quality. They make a similarly something of equal value. So it's going to be an or equal. But the thing is that if it is your basis design, that may be good. You may be able to go through the submittals a little bit quicker. But if they are not, and we're going to kind of go through some things that could go wrong, but maybe you need to be a little bit more cautious and more detailed in understanding what you're getting, what they want to buy, and if that's going to meet your design. So another thing is that the submittals, they sometimes come in packs. Sometimes, and what I mean by that is sometimes the contractor will have all their submittals ready to go, and you'll get like 50 submittals. You will get like all the submittals in your that you've requested in your contract documents. You're going to get them all at one time, and you're going to have to go through them. Other times you're going to be in a onesie twosie kind of thing. Sometimes it's just going to be dripped to you. You're going to get one this week and a couple the other week. However, and this is absolutely critical that you understand this and that you learn this, is that not all products are created equal. Some of your larger products will take substantially longer to get. And obviously you probably, I've talked about schedule a number of times on this podcast. It is critical to make sure that you don't jeopardize the schedule by waiting to review submittals. And it's easy to do, I mean, you get a bunch of submittals, you're doing something else, you're like, oh, I got another deadline that I have to work on. But understand that there are critical path items that need to be reviewed and decided upon so they can be officially ordered to make sure that everything doesn't, get out of whack. And again, typically your biggest submittal is some of your larger equipment. Now, how do you know what's a long lead item and what's not? You're not an expert on everything. So the answer is, again, to ask. Talk to the contractor, talk to the CM. Sometimes they know exactly how long it's going to take to get a specific piece of equipment. If you get a chunk of submittals, I would recommend the first thing that you do is say, okay, what's most critical? What do you want off my desk, like yesterday? Because oftentimes that's going to be the case. They want these, they want to order them already. So you want to make sure that you ask which of these submittals are really hot, what are critical, what you need to get back right away, and what can wait. I mean, typically you're not going to wait more than 2 weeks to review submittals. At least I hope not. But sometimes they drag. You lose track of things, and you need to make sure that you ask yourself, do I have any submittals to review? Maybe do a little bit at a time, every day, just before you get into the regular designing of other systems, that you review submittals. So, and it's not, maybe it's not your job. Maybe that's not one thing that you have to cover, but we're assuming for this podcast, you're the man. You're the person that has to review all the submittals for this project. All right, so reviewing them, some of the things that you want to make sure that you're looking at, you want to make sure that they line up with your schedules. That's typically how I review it. Make sure that they're the right size, they're the right capacity, they have the right accessories, they have the right electrical connections. One thing you might want to do is check them versus your sequence of operations, especially if they're not the basis design. So you want to make sure that you take a look at that. And if you have any questions, again, ask the construction management team, ask the general contractor, ask the HVAC contractor exactly, what's up with this? Why isn't this quite right? Ultimately, that's what you want to do. You don't want to kind of go back, because the next step is actually stamping it, and marking it up. Through this review process, that's what you're going to do. You're going to end up either approving it as noted, revise and resubmit. You're going to reject it, or sometimes you're going to end up with these weird ones that are for information only that you don't really do or say anything about. You just get them so it's in your file and you know about it. But a lot of times, if it's like a revise and resubmit or approved as noted or rejected, you want to be able to communicate that clearly to the not only maybe the contractor, so the contractor understands, but you need to make sure that the whoever the manufacturer's rep understands what your notes and markups mean. And a lot of times you can go back and forth because you really don't understand. So you may get a submittal and the performance characteristics are not what you want. So you mark it up. You're just like, no, I have a schedule and it says this, and then you send it back. And what you really don't understand is that the actual piece of equipment may not be able to do that. Maybe it's slightly different than your base's design. And if you were just to take the simple conversation to the person who's actually producing the submittals for the manufacturer's rep, maybe you'd get that answered quickly and clearly. And you could come to some agreement saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to send this back. It's going to have these comments on it. And I just make those changes. A lot of times when you do the approved as noted, you're not ever checking again if you get, what you've requested, which can be problematic at times. Not that everything, needs a revise and resubmit stamp on it, but you just want to make sure that you don't go back and forth. Again, this is a timing thing. They're very critical, and you want to make sure that you get the right equipment that you designed to in a timely fashion. You don't want that back and forth. So ultimately, at the end of the day, once you've gone through and approved these things, and I'll just stop there. The manufacturer's reps too. Sometimes you're dealing with people that. The manufacturer's reps, there are people in the manufacturer's reps community that deal just with engineers. There are other, within that same company, there may be other reps that you don't ever talk to, but they deal with selling to the contractors. And those can be different people. So whoever specified, who helped you with the design may not be the same person helping with the purchase of that equipment. So that's one of the reasons there can be some inconsistencies between the two. But if it's something that the basis of design, a lot of times I just see those, they just typically fly through. Not that you want to be able to make sure that, again, this is your last chance to catch anything that, that wasn't quite right. We can change that. And again, understand that any changes, typically if it's something small or it's not right, you can get that. But since the contractor has already purchased something, if you're going to make a betterment, if you're going to change something like, you know what, I really, I thought about it again, and this 5 horsepower motor really should be a 7.5 horsepower motor, that may not be something that you're going to get. Maybe the larger fan size is going to work for here. Or maybe, I need to change the impeller size. Maybe the impeller would be okay because typically they'd have to trim that anyway. But, if you're going to add something to the scope of the work, this is not the time to do it. You might have to end up going through some sort of, an ASI process where you make official changes to your design before you can get it approved. And again, you're just, especially with the long lead items, that's not the kind of situation you want to get into. So having said that, what can go wrong? Well, some things that I've seen happen in the past, and this one, the first one, you can get the wrong refrigerant type. If you order something and you're looking for a specific refrigerant, sometimes you don't get that refrigerant. And sometimes that's not your fault. Sometimes, it's just a weird thing that may happen. Probably 9 times out of 10, even like 99 times out of 100, you're going to get the right refrigerant. But you want to make sure, especially in the submittal review process, that you're actually checking that refrigerant type to make sure it's what you want for your project. A lot of things have to do with electrical connections and sizes. Sometimes when you go with a different manufacturer, the size increases. Maybe it bumps up to a different motor automatically. And does that impact the electrical design? A lot of electrical engineers don't necessarily review HVAC submittals, even though there are critical components in there. So if you see something that might be a deviation from what's on your schedule, you might want to go back to the electrical engineer and say, hey, is this going to be an issue? Are you going to have to go through and make a change or upsize, a feeder for a particular breaker? So those are some of the things you want to keep in mind. Also, missing accessories. This can be, this is very common. Missing accessories, whether it be, a damper, internal damper, maybe it's a disconnect switch, maybe it's, maybe it's a curb, a number of items that could be missed with the accessories. A lot of times, I can give one example. If you're putting in, especially in the northern climates, if you're putting in a split system, you might want a wind baffle on your exterior condensing unit. That allows the wind baffle allows you to operate at lower temperatures. And it's just literally, there's nothing different about the condenser itself. It is just the wind baffle that prevents those gusting winds to really derating the performance of that condensing unit. So, but again, that's one of the things that you need to be able to catch and analyze. Do they have the baffle? It's just a piece of plastic. Make sure you get it. Otherwise, you could potentially, have issues with your design later on. And also, with the accessories, does this affect the control sequences? If you're missing something, different things, different thermostats. Is the thermostat missing? Is it something that's going to be provided by the temperature controls contractor? Is it something I'm getting with the unit? So a lot of times, some of these accessories could be an either-or sort of thing. Whether the electrical contractor is providing them, whether it's coming with the equipment, whether the temperature controls contractor is going with them, or what. So, number 4 on this list of things, this is probably by far maybe one of the biggest things, is the wrong dimensions. Not all manufacturers make products that are the same size. Especially when you're dealing with things that aren't the basis of design, things can go terribly wrong really, really fast, especially when it impacts, say, the architecture of a lot of like the screen walls. When you have on the roof, you'll have screen walls screening off your HVAC equipment because nobody wants to see that nasty HVAC equipment, and they might all of a sudden, you designed it for 3 foot of clearance or 4 foot of clearance in front of an electrical panel, and all of a sudden it's right there. It's right up on that thing, and you just can't move those panels. It's just you've gone through that. Has to deal with the structure, that has to deal with the amount of panels that gets purchased. Just because you said that something was this dimension, and then you get a product that's not your basis design and it's something completely different, you're still on the spot for making sure that fits in that position. So check your dimensions when you're going through the submittals. That's one thing that really could, help you out. And again, along with that, or equal doesn't always mean equal. A lot of times, again, you have that basis of design, but you have to have, especially on public projects, you have to have multiple vendors that can bid this, so you can get a competitive bidding situation, ultimately getting the best price, right? But you don't necessarily always get the same quality. Some of the quality you need to check. Sometimes you get something that, is not the same thing. It's something completely different. So that's one thing you just want to make sure of in checking your submittals. Also, number 6, ordering too late. Again, this is, you would think that long lead items would be, the contractor would be right up on that and making sure that those get selected and put in and reviewed, and you get the submittal. You can't make him issue a submittal, but there should be some management structure in place to say, hey, what's your long lead items? Let's get those submittals in here. Let's get them reviewed by the engineer, and let's get them processed. If once you go through this situation a couple of times, you'll know what are the long lead items, and how you can go ahead and get those processed. You might even ping the management team or the HVAC guy saying, hey, when are you going to get those submittals to me? Because I know it's going to take you a long time. That can really affect design. There's situations in the past where I know that, they haven't been able to complete a room because, granted, engineers allow architects to give them a little space for a mechanical room. So sometimes with some air handlers, you have to be able to build the room around the air handler because you can't actually fit it through the standard door. So in that case, you have to leave the building enclosure open to the environment until you get that piece of equipment delivered, and then you can close it up. It has to the enclosure has to be built around the piece of equipment. That is not favorable at all, but that's just the way it happens sometimes. And again, you want to get the little back and forth waltz kind of kiboshed, put away, because a lot of times, I've seen it where they multiple versions. I mean, you can get up to 4 or 5 versions of getting this stuff right. It just gets ridiculous. And each time you give something back, it's going to take a couple of weeks. So if you go back and forth, 4 times, that's essentially 8 weeks of wasted time each time you do that. So it really eats into that scheduling clock. So that really affects a lot of different things. So get those done right the first time. All right. Well, thanks for your time. That's all I have for construction submittals. Hopefully hopefully this was helpful to you. I really appreciate each and every one of you listening. If you know somebody who needs to learn more about submittals or processing submittals, maybe say, hey, check out this podcast. And if they don't know what podcasts are, maybe you can be the one to enlighten them. If you want, and again, be part of that growing community at HVAC360.com and get on the mailing list. And I'm not only issuing different fun things, but also some free continuing education credit as well. So if you can do that, if you can also consider leaving me a rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'll give you a shout out the next time we do the episode after you do that. And that's it for this week. Well, that's a wrap for this week of HVAC 360. I'm Matt Nelson, helping you go further and faster in the field of HVAC. And as always, know what you build and share what you know.